It was one of those hot summer days when everything feels heavy in the air. The sun was shining bright, and I was home alone with my dad while Mom was away visiting her sister for the weekend. I remember feeling a bit excited to have some time with him, but also a little nervous. What could happen in this empty house? As the day went on, my dad seemed different. He was acting more playful than usual. We were joking around and he suggested we watch a movie together. "How about something a little spicy?" he said, with a sly smile. I laughed, thinking he was just being silly, but a part of me wondered if he meant something more. We settled on a romantic movie, the kind that had lots of tension and passion. I could see my dad glancing at me during the steamy scenes, and my heart raced. Was he really enjoying this? I tried to focus on the screen, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at me in a way that made everything feel different. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. My heart dropped. Who could it be? I quickly looked at my dad, and he waved me to stay quiet as I tiptoed to the door. I peeked out through the window and saw our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, standing there with a basket of cookies. I breathed a sigh of relief and opened the door. "Hi, I brought some cookies," she said with a warm smile. But as she stepped inside, I could sense my dad's mood change. He looked tense, and I could see him fidgeting. "Oh, thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Just what we needed," he said, his voice a bit too cheerful after she left the air. Felt thick with something unspoken. I could see my dad looking at me, his expression a mix of desire and uncertainty. "I know it's wrong, but I can't help how I feel," he whispered. The room felt charged and my mind spun with confusion. Excitement? What was happening? Was I imagining this, or was my dad really crossing a line? Just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Mom saying she'd be home sooner than expected. Panic flashed across my dad's face. "We have to act normal," he said quickly, pulling away. But the moment was already hanging heavy between us. I felt the weight of temptation and the thrill of the unknown as we tried to pretend everything was fine. But deep down, I knew things had changed. The air crackled with unspoken words, and every glance felt charged with energy when Mom finally returned. She walked in with a bright smile, completely unaware of the tension that had built up. "What did you do while I was gone?" she asked. But both of us could only manage nervous laughter as the days went by. I couldn't shake the feeling of what had almost happened that day. I kept replaying those moments in my mind. The way he looked at me, the charged atmosphere between us. Would things ever be the same one evening as we were all watching TV together? I caught my dad glancing at me again, and my heart raced. I had a secret that was too exciting and terrifying to share. Would we ever talk about what happened? The thrill of the unknown hung in the air, leaving me curious and anxious. What would happen next? Would this secret linger between us, or would it bring us closer together in a way that could change everything? Only time would tell. The weeks following that intense day felt surreal. It was as if a strange cloud hung over our house, a secret neither my dad nor I could acknowledge. I found myself constantly replaying those moments in my mind. The way he had looked at me, the electricity in the air, and the mix of confusion and desire that swirled between us one evening while I was in my room studying. I heard the familiar sound of my dad laughing downstairs. Curious. I crept to the top of the stairs, peering down to see him sitting at the dining table chatting with Mom. They seemed so normal, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of our shared secret pressing down on me just then. Mom turned to me and I called out, "Hey, do you want to join us for a game?" Her bright smile was infectious, but my heart was still racing from my earlier thoughts. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. As I made my way down the stairs, my dad glanced at me, and for a brief moment our eyes locked. There was a flash of something, an understanding perhaps, left me breathless as we played. Laughter filled the room, but I noticed my dad was more animated than usual, leaning closer to me, his arm brushing against mine each time our skin touched. I felt a thrill run through me. Was he trying to rekindle that spark we had shared, or was I imagining it that night? I found myself wandering into the living room. I was hoping to clear my head, but instead I found my dad sitting on the couch, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring into space. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to break the mood. He looked up, surprised. "Oh, hey. I didn't think anyone would be up." His voice was warm but tinged with something deeper. "Can't sleep?" I asked, taking a seat across from him. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Just thinking about stuff." He paused, his gaze flickering to the floor. "You know about that day." My heart raced again. "Yeah, me too." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tension was palpable. "I shouldn't have brought it up," he said suddenly, his tone serious. "It was a mistake." "Was it?" I asked, surprising myself with the boldness of my question. I mean, it felt different. He looked at me, then really looked at me. It didn't it? The air thickened between us, charged with unspoken words, just as I was about to respond. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I reached for it, hoping it would break the tension. It was a text from a friend asking if I wanted to hang out. I hesitated, then texted back. "Sure, be there in a bit." "Going out?" my dad asked, his tone casual, but I could see a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. "Just for a bit," I replied, standing up. "I'll be back soon, okay?" He said, but I could tell he was a bit sad. I left the house feeling a mix of excitement and guilt as I walked to my friend's house. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something important behind later. That night, after spending time with my friends, I returned home still buzzing from the excitement as I tiptoed into the living room. I saw my dad sitting on the couch, a book in hand. He looked up and he smiled when he saw me. "Hey, how was it?" he asked, setting the book aside. "It was fun," I replied, settling down next to him. "Did you miss me?" He joked lightly, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that made my heart skip a beat. "Maybe a little," I admitted, biting my lip. He laughed softly, but there was a depth to his laughter that made my stomach flutter. "I missed you too." Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and both of us jumped. My heart raced as we exchanged glances. "Who could that be?" I asked. But before my dad could answer, he got up to check. As he opened the door, I heard a familiar voice. Mrs. Thompson again, standing there with another batch of cookies. "Hi there, just thought I'd drop by again," she said cheerfully. I sighed, inwardly feeling the moment between my dad and me slip away again. He smiled at her, but I could see the way his eyes flicked back to me. I felt an urge to just shoo her away, to reclaim that electric moment we had almost had. After she left, the air felt charged again. I turned to my dad, a brush of courage filling me. "What were we talking about before?" I asked, looking deep into his eyes. He swallowed hard. I don't know if we should talk about it. "Why not? It's already out there," I pressed, feeling the heat rising in my cheeks. He sighed, leaning back on the couch. "Okay, but you have to promise me something. Whatever we talk about, we keep it between us. No one can ever know." "I promise," I said, my heart racing with excitement and fear. "All right," he said, looking serious. "I feel something between us. I can't explain it, but it's there and it's real." My breath caught in my throat. "I feel it too," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. He reached for my hand, and as our fingers touched, a spark ignited. "I've thought about what it would be like if we explored this connection, but it's risky," he said, his voice low and intense. "I know," I replied, biting my lip. "But what if it could be something more?" He was silent for a moment, contemplating, then he nodded. "Maybe we should explore it just a little, just to see what it feels like." My heart raced at the thought. "And," I nodded eagerly, "okay," but just as the moment hung in the air, my phone buzzed again. It was another message, this time from Mom. "I'm on my way home. Can't wait to see you both." A chill ran down my spine. "Dad, she's coming back," I said, panic flooding my voice. He quickly released my hand and we both sat up straighter, trying to look casual. "We'll talk later," he whispered, his eyes filled with urgency. I felt a mix of fear and longing as I stood up and moved to the front door to prepare for Mom's arrival. The electricity from our moment lingered, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our secret was still alive and safe. Waiting when Mom walked in, she greeted us with her usual warmth, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "What were you two talking about?" she asked with a curious smile. "Nothing much," my dad replied, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. The rest of the evening felt surreal. We shared dinner, and we chatted about mundane things, but my mind was racing. What would happen next? Would we ever speak of what had nearly transpired? As Mom went to bed that night, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, my heart pounding. The air felt charged again, and I wondered if I would ever feel that connection with my dad again. Just as I was about to go to bed, I heard a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find my dad standing there, looking nervous but determined. "Can we talk?" he asked softly. I nodded, my heart racing as I led him into my room. We sat on the edge of my bed, and the moment felt heavier than before. "Listen," he said, his voice low. "I know things have been strange, and I don't want to ruin our family, but I can't ignore this feeling anymore." "I don't want to ruin anything either," I replied, my heart racing. "But I can't help how I feel." He looked at me intently, and I could feel the tension crackling between us. What if we keep this our secret just for a little while longer? I felt a rush of excitement at the thought. "Okay," I said, my heart racing, but just then a loud noise came from outside, startling us both. It sounded like a car screeching to a halt, and I felt my heart drop. "Dad, what was that?" I asked, panic rising again. "Let's check it out," he said, getting up as we moved cautiously toward the window. I felt my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced out and he saw a familiar figure stumbling out of a car, Mom's sister. She was supposed to be staying the weekend. What was she doing here? He froze, a look of panic crossing his face. "What is she doing here?" he muttered, clearly not ready for this. "Hide," I whispered, and we quickly ducked behind the couch. We watched as Aunt Carol entered the house, chatting loudly and dragging in bags surprise. "I couldn't wait to see you all," she called out. I felt my stomach drop as I realized we were trapped. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My dad glanced at me and I could see the tension in his eyes. "We'll have to act normal, just play it cool." We both tried to breathe normally as Aunt Carol bustled around, completely unaware of the secret tension between us as she chattered away. I felt the weight of our unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Aunt Carol headed to the kitchen to put away her bags, giving us a brief moment of peace. "Do you think she'll find out?" I asked my dad, my heart racing. "I hope not," he replied, his voice low, "but we'll have to be careful just then." Aunt Carol returned a plate of cookies in hand. "You two look so serious. What are you talking about?" My dad quickly masked his expression with a smile. "Just some old memories," he said smoothly. "Oh, good," Aunt Carol laughed, plopping down next to us. "I love it when you two reminisce. You're the best duo." I felt a strange mix of annoyance and amusement. Could she really not see the tension we spent the rest of the evening making small talk? But every time my dad brushed against me, I felt that familiar spark. It was maddening trying to keep our secret hidden, while all I wanted was to explore those feelings we had shared. Eventually, Aunt Carol excused herself to get settled, and my dad turned to me, his eyes wide with urgency. "We need to talk," he whispered, glancing toward the kitchen. I nodded, and we quickly moved to my room, shutting the door behind us. "What if she finds out?" I asked, my voice trembling. "She won't," he said, determination in his eyes. "But we have to figure this out. This can't go on like this forever." I nodded, my heart racing. "What do? We take it slow. Just keep it between us for now?" he said firmly. "Okay," I replied, feeling both excited and anxious. But as we were about to sit down, there was a loud knock on the door, and Aunt Carol's voice called out, "Hey, you two! Everything okay in there?" We froze, exchanging panicked glances. Yeah, just a minute," I called back, trying to sound casual. "Okay, just checking," she replied. And I could hear her footsteps retreating down the hall. We both let out a sigh of relief, but the tension was still thick in the air. "This is going to be complicated," I said softly. "Yeah, but we can manage," my dad replied, his eyes locked onto mine. "I trust you," I whispered, feeling a rush of vulnerability as we sat together. Our moment was interrupted again by Aunt Carol, who popped her head into the room with a grin. "Are you guys ready for movie night?" she asked brightly. I felt a pain of frustration, but managed to smile. "Sure, let's do it," I said, masking my disappointment. We joined Aunt Carol in the living room, but as the movie played, I kept stealing glances at my dad. The tension between us crackled like electricity, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing as the credits rolled. Aunt Carol yawned. "I'm going to hit the hay," she said. "You two should get some rest too." "Good night," we echoed, and once she disappeared down the hall, my heart raced with anticipation. "Now what?" I asked, breath hitching. "We wait for the right moment," he replied, eyes intense. But just as I turned to leave, Aunt Carol peeked back in. "Everything all right?" she asked, suspicion in her gaze. "Yeah, we're fine," I shot back. My heart racing after she left, I whispered, "What are we going to do?" "Stay calm," he said. "We'll figure it out." The next days felt like a tightrope walk. One afternoon, while Mom was out, I found my dad at the kitchen table. "Dad, we need to talk," I said, my voice shaky. He set down his newspaper, concern etching his face. "What about us?" I said, heart pounding. "I can't stop thinking about it." "Neither can I," he admitted, leaning closer. "But Mom, maybe we take a chance, just a small one," I suggested, breath quickening. He hesitated, but nodded okay. "Just a kiss," just as we were about to touch lips. Mom's voice rang out from the door. "Hey, are you two okay out here?" We froze, hearts racing, and pulled away. "Yeah, we're fine," I called, panic rising once she left. I turned to my dad, urgency gripping me. "We can't keep hiding this." "Yes." He nodded, determination in his eyes. "Then let's tell her." When we returned inside, my heart thumped loudly. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, voice steady. "What about?" she asked, brow furrowing. "About how we feel," I replied, my breath catching. Her eyes widened in shock. "Wait, you mean?" "Yes," my dad confirmed. "We want to explore this, but we don't want to hurt you." The silence was thick as realization dawned on her. "I never saw this coming." "I know," I said, desperate. "But it's tearing us apart. I need time to think," she said, her voice trembling as she walked away. "What have we done?" I whispered to my dad. He took a deep breath. "We opened a door we can't close now." We faced the consequences, and just like that, I realized our leap had changed everything forever.